Hey everyone, this week it's street photography from San Francisco with the Nikkor Z 28mm lens. So if you follow my channel regularly, firstly thanks a lot, but you'll know that I recently went to California. A couple of weeks ago I got some shots of the Golden Gate Bridge, I'll put a link up top to that, and last week I was at Yosemite National Park where I was capturing sunrise and sunset shots. And I'll put links to both videos in the comments below as well if you are new to the channel. This week I'm carrying on the theme. I'm back in San Francisco, but it's going to be street photography this week. I didn't get any footage while I was there. I wanted to concentrate on just getting shots. And I was using the 28mm Nikkor Z lens because I wanted to be quite inconspicuous, didn't really want to stand out. And this lens is perfect for that. It's quite small, it's a 2.8 aperture. It's a good focal length for street photography. So I'm going to put some of my shots up on the screen and talk through them. So without further ado, let's have a look. Okay, so this first shot was taken in Chinatown. These two guys were stood out in an alleyway and they were kind of pretend fighting. They were stood outside of a martial arts training centre. So I think perhaps one of them, probably the guy on the right, worked there or something. And he was asking the man on the left to take shots at him basically, and he was kind of half pretending but taking swings at him and things. And the other guy was kind of quite effortlessly blocking them and deflecting them, and that was making the guy on the left chuckle a little bit. So it was quite a nice little scene, and I got a burst of shots off and basically just chose the best shot from those. There was another shot I quite liked where the man on the right had his hands a little bit higher, it looked a little bit more dynamic, but he was covering his face, so I preferred to have this shot where you could see his face. Overall I just like the shot because of the interaction between the two people in the shot. This shot was taken in Chinatown as well. It was actually on the same street as the previous shot, so it's the Fortune Cookie Factory, which is fairly famous now. It's featured in lots of TV programmes and it's in travel guides and things like that. So we definitely knew we wanted to go check it out. And it's really cool because it seems like they make the fortune cookies in quite a old school, authentic way with all of this old machinery, no modern factory conveyor belts or anything like that. So I thought it'd be really nice to get a shot in there, and I asked the lady if I could take a photo and she kindly agreed. And I just tried to get a nice composition really with these bins in the bottom left, kind of going round the bottom up to the right with the machinery there, kind of forming like a crescent frame around her. And there were some fairly nice tones in the scene as well. I had to use a high ISO, it's 3200, but the camera coped with it quite well, it's not too grainy. I could have perhaps dropped my F number, and that might have been nice to blur out the background as well a little bit more. But I was working quite quickly and she seemed quite busy and I didn't want to disturb her, so this is the shot I ended up with at these settings, and I'm still fairly pleased with it. So you might be noticing a theme now. This is also in Chinatown. Took quite a lot of shots that day, and we actually got there during the Autumn Moon Festival. We didn't know it was on, it was quite a surprise. But there was a lot going on up and down the streets there, and this was a little performance. I think it was maybe like Tai Chi or something. I'm not quite sure, but they were all performing these martial arts moves quite slowly, quite choreographed in the middle of the street. And I thought it looked really good. And I took a few shots to start with, which were average. I couldn't quite get the right angle, it wasn't quite working, until I crouched down and got low. And just at that moment, the two at the front, well, all of them kind of made this pose, but I think it really works because you've got the two at the front with their arms out, looking forwards, and with the angle looking upwards, you can see those lanterns stretched out between the buildings there, and looking up the street with the buildings on either side, that made quite a nice symmetrical composition. So I was quite pleased with that shot. I like the colours as well. I like the texture on their outfits and the texture on the ground there as well. Just leads you in and your eye kind of goes right up the middle into the middle of the picture and then back down the edges where the buildings are. And I think that might be my favourite shot that I got, certainly from Chinatown at least. So this shot probably wouldn't have made it into this video had it not been for just playing around really. It started life as a very uninspiring shot, taken downtown, and I didn't even really think about using it. I didn't flag it, or I just overlooked it really when I was looking through my shots. But when I went back through them on a second inspection, or maybe even third and fourth inspection, I started to just have a little play around with cropping it. And when I cropped it down to just the person, it started to get a little bit more interesting. But I actually went even further than that, and might be a little bit unusual, but I cut off the top of the body and focused more on the shadow. And even then I wasn't quite sure about it. I wasn't going to include it in this video. But I went away again, and maybe a day later came back and I saw the cropped image in Lightroom, and I thought I really liked it. It really stood out to me. It was a bit different. I think it's quite graphical with the lines of the zebra crossing going up there, and obviously it's a bit unusual not having your subject in the image, or only half of them, and having the shadow instead. But I don't know, I quite like it, but I'm interested to know what you think. Do you like this image? I know a lot of people would find fault with it, but I think on an artistic level it kind of works for me somehow, on a graphical level as well. I like the texture in the image. I brought that out with a bit of clarity and the texture slider in Lightroom, and I think it works quite well in black and white. So yeah, a bit of a happy accident, but I really like that one. This is kind of a tourist shot really, because I just thought it summed up what San Francisco is kind of about really, with the city. You've got the big building there in the background, you've got the cable car coming up through the centre, somebody crossing over the zebra crossing there, and you've got some graffiti on the wall in the distance. I quite like how the zebra crossing and the cable car form a cross in the foreground of the scene, and my eye is led up from the bottom left across the zebra crossing, past the cable car, and then towards the graffiti, and then it'll start to roam around and I see the buildings and the surrounding area. So it's not the most impressive shot I've ever taken, but I did find it encapsulated something about my experience in San Francisco, so I wanted to include that one. I did think for quite a long time about whether I was going to include this image in the video, because as a general rule I don't capture images of homeless people. I think it's a bit intrusive and probably quite exploitative to take a shot like this of someone who's found themselves in probably quite unfortunate circumstances. And I think it's probably reasonable to presume that this gentleman is almost certainly homeless. But I did keep the shot in the end for two reasons. The first is I was sat on a bench. This is on Haight Street, quite a famous street in San Francisco. You've got a lot of famous sites down there, and I was sat on the bench just taking shots up and down the street. I had my camera out, and this man could clearly see me with my camera taking shots. He was on the other side of the street, and he walked right towards me while I was taking shots. He didn't seem to mind at all. He looked at me as I was taking them, and I took that as a sign that he really didn't mind if I was going to get a photo or not. And the second reason is that there is quite a serious problem, I think, in San Francisco with homelessness. You see a lot of people there who are not doing too great, and they really do need to do something to help sort that situation out and help the people who found themselves in that situation. I'm not sure quite how they're going to do it. It's going to be a big challenge. But I thought that by showing this image, it does highlight it, particularly to people who are not familiar with San Francisco, who might only know the city from movies, and you see all the good parts of it, but you don't necessarily see the bad parts. And maybe this just helps to highlight that. And I guess there's a third reason as well, is because I think it's a good technically good image. It's very sharp. It fills the frame very well. The lighting is quite nice, just shining on the edge of the man's jumper there. So yeah, let me know what you think. Like I said, I did decide to keep it in, but I'm still not 100% sure if it's right, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts on it as well. So here's another image taken on Haight Street. I don't know what the circumstances of these people were, but they just seemed to be having a good time on the street. And I did ask them if I could take this shot, primarily of the street art on the wall, but inevitably they were going to be in the shot as well, and they didn't mind. I quite like how there's almost a leading line starting with the guy at the bottom of the image, then the dogs and the other two people against the wall. That kind of brings your eye into the image and then towards the art on the wall there at the background. And again, I think this does say something about San Francisco. Perhaps not the usual shots that you might get in a tourist guide, but it certainly is a very real scene that you will see on some street corners in San Francisco. And I like the colours in the scene. I like the expressions of the guy at the front there, and also the dogs. The one staring at the camera looks almost quite serious, probably quite protective of his owners. So there's a lot going on in this image, lots of little stories that you can pull out, and I quite like that. As you can see from the writing on the front of these little vehicles here, this shot was taken at Pier 39, so quite a famous pier with lots of amusements and shops and food places and things. Quite tacky in a lot of ways, but you've got to go see it as a tourist. And this was taken from an upper level, and I was looking over down at these people who obviously work there, having a chat, and I just liked the way the light was falling with this big shadow, and they were chatting about something. He's pointing, I'm not quite sure what they were talking about, but I liked the pose and the light and the composition of the two buggies and these two men talking, so I thought that'd be quite a nice shot to capture. And again, I quite like the texture with the ground there, the concrete floor, and I thought it looked quite nice in black and white with that texture. So quite a simple shot, but I thought it did work fairly well. This is a much more complicated shot, taken downtown in the evening. It was fantastic light, quite low in the sky, and it was lighting up all of these buildings, which were creating all of these great geometric lines with the buildings there and the zebra crossing. And I like the way that it all kind of points towards this person walking towards the camera, and they're quite silhouetted against this bright area in the background, so they stood out quite well. And I actually took this shot with the camera on my phone. I didn't have time to get my camera out, but I saw the great light and the person walking towards the camera, so I got down quite low so I could get those zebra crossing lines in, and I was quite pleased how it came out in the end. Probably wouldn't work if I blew this up with the quality from my phone, but for on-screen purposes works perfectly well, and the wide angle lens in the camera really works for the shot, I think. So this was taken on the same evening, but with my Z7 and the 28mm lens, and it's all about the contrast in this image, with the low sun creating those amazing shadows, and they stretch out so far that they pull you into the image. It's like a leading line, and everything's converging towards the people and that sun in the distance. So I don't think this would work if I hadn't edited it like I have, with the strong contrast, making them almost silhouetted, and it really works in black and white. And there's nothing particularly interesting going on with the people, they're just walking down the street. But like I said, because of the strong shadows and the contrast and the tones and textures in the image, I think it does quite work. So quite pleased with that one as well. So I hope it was interesting to look through those images. That's about it for this video. All the usual stuff now. If you have liked the video, please give me a thumbs up just down below. You can leave some comments down there, and if you are new to the channel and you want to subscribe, you can click on the big red button. There will be more images coming up from my California trip in future videos, but I think next week I'm going to have a little break and try and get out and do some bird or wildlife photography, because I've not done that for ages. It's also getting to autumn now and the colours are changing in the trees, so it'd be nice to get out and do some woodland at some point in the future. But until the next video, thanks a lot for watching everyone, and bye for now.